Welcome to The Whiskey Chronicles, where Justin and his father cover topics from outdoor sports to whiskey. They will be joined from time to time with all kinds of guests, so we hope you enjoy. Here are your hosts, Justin and Kevin.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Whiskey Chronicles podcast, the original podcast for outdoor sports and whiskey enthusiasts. We have a special guest with us today, and Kevin's going to go ahead and introduce him.
All right, today we have Pete Vanarnum with us. He's been in law enforcement in the Tahoe Basin for over 40 years. He's worked as in detective, regular patrol, narcotics, coroner, and SWAT. So he was a SWAT sniper for 25 years, so I'm sure you got some stories about that here in this area. So is a SWAT here in El Dorado County?
Yes, it was, and a couple other departments here in the Tahoe Basin.
And then also too, he was a lieutenant at SWAT and commander with El Dorado County Sheriff's Office. He also did the police activities program for at-risk youth. And what kind of stuff did you do with those guys?
It was mainly targeting kind of at-risk gang kids, and most of them were Hispanic kids in town. And so the first thing I did was a boxing program, because boxing is pretty popular with the Hispanic kids. And then we were able to get free skiing with Heavenly Valley, so we got free skiing and lessons for them. And then we did a wilderness backpacking program and an archery program.
Archery, so was it all traditional archery?
Well, we got the equipment donated by a bow company, so it was compound bows.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Nice. A little adjustment here. Also, too, Pete is a traditional archer, and he likes to do black powder hunting, and he does his own reloading, which, you know, we're going to have to sit in on that and learn that from you sometime.
It's the only way you can shoot a lot, because ammo's so hard to get and so expensive. And
Well, hey, with Russia right now, might be a good time to start reloading, so everybody
That's
pay
right.
attention.
We've been saving brass.
Yeah, and you can even cast your own bullets. If things get real bad, you can steal the wheel weights off the cars and melt them down and make bullets out of them.
Well, I'm sure you can find like old lead candlestick holders and all that stuff melted down. I'm sure that's what everybody was doing back in like World War II times and stuff like that.
Yep.
So you were here for 40 years. When did you first come to Tahoe?
1975.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how was it back then?
A lot different. I just graduated from college at Sac State, moved up here with my fiance, who's now my wife, and things were really nice back then. That's changed a lot in 46 years.
Yeah, well, we've seen a lot change in 22 years, so I can't imagine in 46 years it's probably a lot more. Yeah, Cindy was a patient of Mary's, and that's kind of how I met Pete. Pete's one of those guys that you kind of run into people if you live in a small town and you see somebody out over and over, whether it's at the gym or at the grocery store. Pete was this guy that I always saw. I was like, who's this old crazy guy doing like handstand push-ups and all these crazy workouts that like even the young kids can't do? And so we actually, Pete helped us on our archery shoot last year, and for all of you that did the whiskey course, he carried the cinnamon bear to the highest point of the course. So everybody that complained about how hard it was, I guarantee you Pete was probably a little bit older than you taking that up there. And actually, he got a nickname, and Justin kind of came up with a nickname. Why don't you tell?
Pack Mule Pete.
That's
Pack Mule Pete. How old are you, Pete?
68.
68, and he was carrying targets all the way up to the top of the mountain. So any of you guys that were complaining about how hard it was, you guys better shut up and nut up.
That's right. That which does not kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah. And, well, today we're enjoying a little Peerless Rye for Friday Rye Day, and Pete's having a Yingling Lager, which we brought back from Ohio after we were back there for the soccer game and other family things. But also, Pete has done hunter safety. He's taught hunter safety. We're going to get into that, why Pete is probably the best guy for hunter safety. How many years have you done hunter safety?
I did it over 40 years.
Over 40 years. So Pete's been teaching hunter safety. And what areas did you teach hunter safety in?
Well, it covered a lot of different aspects, but we would cover ethics, which is really important for the outdoors and for hunting. I kind of specialized in archery, but we also taught black powder, handguns, shotguns, rifles, wilderness survival, kind of just a general introduction to being a good woodsman.
And then what's about the demographics in the 40 years? What do you see the difference of the demographics in hunter safety classes now?
It used to be in the early days, a lot of young kids with their dads, and now I'd say there's a lot of single parent kids, like a single mother will bring in her son because she wants to get him into hunting because there's not a male role model in the family, and she realizes that it's important to expose him to the outdoors.
And you're still teaching hunter safety classes today, right?
Well, it kind of stopped in the last year because of COVID.
Right.
Everything was done online, and so I'm not sure where it's going to go from there. But in the old days, we actually would take them out to the range and have them shoot the different shooting positions with a .22 rifle, and we'd have a rabbit, and we'd show them how to skin a rabbit. Things have changed over time, and now we don't go to the range anymore. They do shooting with like a laser type rifle. And
one of those kind of bullets that have the laser. You can actually
Right.
pull the trigger, and then it will show the projection of the laser on the target.
Right. And we don't actually skin a rabbit anymore. We have a video of that. So it was more hands-on in the old days, and things changed now with technology.
Well, hey, guys, we do have an online hunter mentorship program, and if you guys are interested in learning more about getting into hunting, feel free to contact us on our website or anything, and maybe we can even get you hooked up with Pete to answer a couple questions for you.
Yeah, we get people filling out the application all the time. So fill out the application, somebody will get back to you. We try to do as best we can. Understand that we do this just to promote hunting and to get more people into it. We absolutely make nothing off of it. We'd like to have somebody help sponsor it so we could actually put some money into it and really drive it. So any sponsors out there listening would definitely reach out to us and talk to us. And we have had, we've mentored 5 people ourselves and gotten 4 of those 5, their first kill, 3 of them being archery kills. And you mentioned about the video of the skinning. One guy we were mentoring, and he finally got a deer down, and then, we started cutting it up, and he's dressing it. And he was like, well, I've seen this on YouTube. And then he goes. Then when we started, he goes, "Well, you can't smell it on YouTube."
There is a distinct smell that goes with it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we're going to get into why Pete is probably the best guy for hunter safety.
Yeah, we'll jump into the meat and potatoes.
Yeah, we're going to go into meat and potatoes of it. So, 1988, September of 1988, Jarbidge Wilderness. Let's go back to that day. Just tell us, like, how did the day start? Where did you wake up? What were you doing, and who were you with?
I was with my younger brother. He's a few years younger than me, and we'd hunted Jarbidge Wilderness a lot with bows, and we wanted to try black powder. So we both had Lyman Great Plains rifle and .54 caliber. It's kind of a reproduction of the Hawken rifle used by the mountain men.
Yeah,
My brother has one. I
Hawken.
got one of those upstairs.
Yeah, it's a nice gun. And so we drove to the town of Jarbidge, and we had planned on backpacking into this area about 6 miles in near some lakes, so we'd have some water and some fishing and hunting also. And so we had pretty heavy packs. We hiked in with all our gear and found a place about 6 miles in. Set up camp and put up our tents, and we decided to go out for an evening hunt. And since we were starting to see some deer in the aspens about a half mile away, we decided to load the guns. And so with black powder, you put the powder down the barrel, and you put a patched ball down, and they have a safe position called half cock, where you pull the hammer halfway back, and that's supposed to be a safe position. And that's where you put the percussion cap on, so that when you pull the hammer back to full cock and pull the trigger, the percussion cap gets ignited by the hammer, and that sets off the powder charge. What we didn't know at the time was that my brother's gun was defective. These guns are made in Italy and imported by Lyman, and he had just bought his a few weeks before. He had sighted it in, and he didn't realize that the sear mechanism that holds the hammer and half-cock was defective, and we weren't aware of that. And so what happened was we started hiking up the trail, and my brother's bootlaces were loose, so he sat down on the side of the trail to tighten up his bootlaces, and he put the rifle across his knees, and I was standing a couple feet away waiting for him to finish.
So you're down range of the muzzle.
Well, at the time, the muzzle wasn't even pointed at me. It was laid across his knees away from me like it should be.
Right.
And that's, one thing we stress in hunter safety is you treat every gun like it's loaded and never, pointed at anybody, whether it's loaded or not. And so he was doing everything right at that point, but then he made the mistake of when he got up and we were kind of in a curve on the trail. And so he grabbed the gun, stood up, and started to head up the trail, and I was in front of him at this point, and as he turned, he made the mistake of swinging the muzzle by my right leg. And at that point, from about 3 inches away, the gun discharged. The hammer fell. He didn't have his hand on the trigger or anything. It was just defective, like we weren't aware of it.
Sear pin or something, or the sear on the hammer was...
It was just defective. It didn't overlap or connect the way it was supposed to inside the mechanism. And we checked it out later after I go through this story, but we had an expert check it out, and he verified that it was defective, and the company admitted it was defective. So in any case, the gun went off. I felt something slap my leg, and I looked at my pant leg, and it started turning red, and I said, oh, shit. And the first thing that went through my mind was, this can't be happening. You're on a hunting trip. You're on a vacation. You're here to have a good time, and now I've been shot. And my brother was starting to freak out. He's yelling, I don't know what happened. I didn't hit the trigger. I don't know what happened. And he was starting to really kind of get really upset. And I said, don't worry about it. We just got to take care of this. And so I sat down on the ground, and I got my hunting knife and cut my pant leg off to see how bad the wound was, and there was a large amount of blood coming out. The ball had entered the inside of my right thigh from about 2 inches away. The entrance hole was about the size of a quarter, and then I felt around to the back of my thigh where the ball had exited, and the exit hole was about the size of your fist.
Oh, God.
And all my tendons were kind of hanging down, almost like shredded spaghetti, just kind of hanging there. And it was pouring out a lot of blood.
So you're able to take that shot and then tell your brother not to worry about it. I mean, were you that calm?
Well, not really, but I think I was calmer than him, probably because, I've been a cop for a long time, and I see a lot of nasty stuff, and I know that the worst thing you can do is to panic, so you got to try to keep your head. And so once I saw that, the hole was pretty big and then I was bleeding pretty bad, I thought that if it hit my femoral artery, I was only going to be around for a few more minutes, because if it hits the femoral artery, you're going to bleed out pretty quick.
And how far were you guys away from the trailhead or vehicles? Or
we were about 6 miles in from the trailhead, and this is in 1988, and this is before we had cell phones
or GPS.
And so, it's not like you can just pull out your phone and call for help. And so, my brother was pretty upset, and he said, what are we going to do? And I said, you're going to go get me some help. And so we tried to put a tourniquet on to stop the flow of blood. It worked to some degree, but I was still bleeding pretty bad. So he ran down to the camp. We had just left about 10 minutes before, and he grabbed a down sleeping bag out of the tent because there was snow on the ground, and it was kind of late afternoon, starting to get dark, and I was starting to go into shock, because when I saw how bad I was injured, it's kind of a natural reaction. Your body goes into shock.
Yeah, I could only imagine. I've impaled my leg on an old rickety fence. I was jumping off, and the top of the fence snapped, impaled right through my calf and all the way to the bone, and you start to freak out.
Yeah.
I could only imagine being that far back in the woods and not being able to call for help or anything like that. It must have been pretty traumatic, I would say.
Yeah, initially when I first got shot, I didn't feel pain right away. It's kind of like when you cut yourself with a knife. It doesn't hurt right away, but after about 10 minutes, it started hurting really bad. And so I was kind of yelling, and I grabbed a stick, and I was biting on the stick to try to just, control the pain. And so my brother ran down, got a down sleeping bag, brought it back up, put me in the down sleeping bag just so I wasn't totally freezing to death. And then he took off down the trail running to try to get help. And kind of a long story here, I just laid there. I had my backpack with me, and I started getting cold. I thought maybe I could try to make a fire, but I wasn't in any position to, grab any firewood. And my brother had already left, so he couldn't help me. And so I kind of just was laying in the sleeping bag in a lot of pain, yelling and kind of praying. I'm not super religious, but at that point I kind of became a little bit more religious. And, time just kind of went by real slow, and it got dark. I could hear animals walking around.
So like when he after the accident happened and then he left, like how many hours of daylight was left when he left?
Probably about an hour later, it started getting dark. And, I knew that he had 6 miles to go.
So prime hunting time, did you still have ready to?
Yeah. Well, I heard animals walking around in the dark, and I thought it meant those could be deer or it could be, mountain lion. There's a lot of them in that area. And when you're, wounded and bleeding, you're not thinking real straight anyhow. And I started feeling kind of sleepy, and I kept trying to keep myself awake because I didn't want to go to sleep, because I was afraid if I went to sleep, I may not wake up, because I still didn't know whether my femoral artery had been hit or not. It turned out later when we, got to medical help that it just missed the femoral artery by, like a half an inch.
Wow.
So I was pretty lucky on that.
Yeah.
So were you carrying a sidearm or anything for protection while you were laying there getting circled by mountain lions?
No, because, when you backpack in with a full pack and food, we were going to stay up there for 5 days to a week. You're carrying a lot of gear. You're carrying a heavy, Hawken rifle. You're carrying powder. You're carrying lead balls. I mean, all that stuff. You're pack muling in, and so even though I usually carry a handgun most places, that was just an extra thing.
Well, you have a firearm, so it's different than archery. Archery, you think like, well, bring a sidearm just in case, but with you already have a firearm with you. So
yeah, but muzzle loader, you get one shot, and then it's going to take you a little bit to get another one off.
Yeah,
especially if you're injured.
Yeah, well,
I'm sure all that stuff was.
Now,
going
did
through
you have your
head.
rifle next to you?
Yeah, I had it next to me, but I didn't load it again. I mean, that was the last thing that I was really concerned with. Even though I heard the animals walking around, I just figured, either I'm going to bleed out and die, or my brother will get help and we'll see what happens. And so after, probably 5 or 6 hours in the dark, and I was in a lot of pain, just kind of wondering what was going to happen, I finally heard a helicopter, and off in the distance over the mountain peaks, I, saw the lights from a helicopter. And the clouds were starting to move in, and I was afraid the helicopter wasn't going to be able to land.
Because of weather?
Because of weather, because it looked like it was going to start raining, and, it's pretty mountainous, and it's dark, and, you don't know what these pilots...
What elevation were you at?
It was probably 8,000 feet.
Yeah.
And it turned out that the helicopter pilot was a Vietnam vet from the Vietnam days. They got a hold of him at a hospital in Boise, Idaho, and we're up in the corner of Idaho and Nevada. And what had happened was my brother ended up running down to the little town of Jarbidge. It's an old mining town. And he started banging on doors of cabins, and he found a guy that was a ham radio operator. And so the guy was able to call for, assistance from this place in Boise, Idaho. And according to what I heard, they got a hold of a couple pilots before, and they said, well, I'm not going to try to fly in there in the dark. I mean, that's kind of nuts. It's dark, and, we can't see what we're doing. But this guy that ended up flying in there was a Vietnam vet, and he was obviously pretty capable, and so he took it on.
There's always blessings, isn't there?
Yeah. So kind of about the time I heard the helicopter and saw the lights, the the clouds just kind of started dissipating. So I don't know if that was divine intervention or what, but
Yeah, probably.
But the helicopter started circling, and I could see a big floodlight kind of going over the area where the meadow was, where we'd set up our camp. And they evidently could see our dome tents set up in the meadow. And my brother was on board, and he said, "Yeah, that's our camp." So I saw them set down and land in the meadow, and then I saw lights coming up the trail to where I was, and they reached me, and my brother was very happy that I was alive. He thought I was going to be dead when he got there.
I bet what was going through your head, I bet there was an overwhelming sense of relief seeing and hearing the helicopter.
Yeah, it was, and the pain was getting so bad, it was just like, I just need some morphine or something. So they got there, and they had medics there with a stretcher, and they shot me up with morphine. And so, even though you're still in pain, then it's more kind of detached, and that was really helpful that, the pain was not so horrendous at that point. And then they started carrying me down this, it's basically a deer trail in a very mountainous, rocky terrain. And, I weigh 190 pounds, and there was like 4 guys, I think, but, it's a pretty awkward load to carry on a stretcher in the dark down the trail.
Uneven terrain and...
Yeah, and they were slipping, and, they'd have to stop and rest and put the stretcher down. And, at this point
Were you feeling every step?
Yeah, but like I said, I was under the influence of morphine at that point, so I was just glad to be, on the road to some kind of help.
Yeah, going somewhere to some destination off the mountain.
So go back to before they got there. We're just wondering, you always hear people have these things that happen to them, and sometimes they see light, they see things, they have epiphanies of life.
Yeah, when you're laying there, I had a lot of time to lay there and think, and it puts things in perspective, definitely. And you just realize that all you want to do is, see your family. I had 2 kids at the time, and they were real young, and I wanted to see my wife and family and just, make it home. And all the stuff that you worry about, like bills and work and other things, that just becomes so unimportant. So it helped me later, after I recovered, just because when things were getting bad or I'd start getting stressed out, I'd think back to my time laying there on the mountain thinking, I could die and never see my family. And it kind of makes you realize that a lot of the bullshit that you worry about is just bullshit.
It's not really important,
is it? Yeah, it's not important. It put things in perspective.
So they get there, they're taking you down to the helicopter, and how long was it till you got onto the helicopter about? And then
it was pretty quick. They strapped me onto some kind of an outside thing on the struts of the helicopter. I don't think I was even really inside the helicopter, but they wrapped me up in like a sleeping bag and stuff and strapped me on.
Were you still bleeding at the time? Were you still bleeding a lot, or?
Yeah, but they put some bandages on me.
They probably had a little bit of a better tourniquet to stop the blood flow and everything also.
Yeah, and just their positive words of encouragement were good. And so they flew from there to Twin Falls, Idaho, which is just a little bit across the border, and landed me at I think it was called Magic Valley Hospital in Twin Falls. And when I got there, the doctors checked me out, and the doctors gave me the great news that I might lose my leg. And, I was a police officer at the time, so I'm thinking, man, if I even make it but lose my leg, what am I going to do? And before they did surgery, they wanted to talk to my wife and kind of get her authorization. So they tried calling back to talk to her, and the phone was outside the bedroom at that time, and she couldn't hear it. So they sent 2 cops that I work with over to the house to knock on the door to communicate with her. So she answers the door with my kids, and she knew these guys. They were friends of mine, and they go, "Pete's been shot." She goes, "You guys must be messed up. Pete's on a hunting trip. He's, when the cops come to your door and say your husband's been shot when he's a cop, you figure it happened on duty."
Right, yeah.
And she goes, "No, he's not at work. He's hunting with his brother." And they go, "No, we know. There was an accident." And so she got that great news. And Actually, some of the local attorneys were pretty good, even though defense attorneys and I sometimes butt heads on cases and stuff. A lot of the local defense attorneys donated some money to fly her out to the hospital where I was staying.
Oh, nice.
So she ended up staying about a week there at a motel across the street, and until I was in decent enough shape to make the drive back. Yeah.
So how many stitches? What was the operation for?
Well, they couldn't
putting it back together.
They couldn't stitch it up because the exit hole was so big and nasty and full of infection, because the muzzle was just a few inches from my.
It had to be black and just gnarly looking.
Yeah, and all the black powder and the muzzle blast went through my leg, so my leg was pretty much like what they had in the Civil War. Just nasty. All the gunpowder went through my leg, so it was causing an infection. And the day after I got to the hospital, I could smell my leg starting to get really rank, kind of
like decaying flesh.
Yeah,
smell.
Exactly. And I knew that wasn't good. And the doctors, were loading me up with all kinds of antibiotics, and every day they'd put me in a big whirlpool bath with all kinds of antiseptic stuff to kind of clean out the wound, and then they'd go in with forceps and try to, cut out, infected pieces of flesh and more gunpowder and that type of stuff. But like I said, they couldn't sew it up because they wanted it to heal from the inside out.
Right.
And so they said the most important thing that I could do when it was healing was to keep trying to walk on it and stretch it open, and that would cause it to bleed. But they said if I didn't, kind of stay active, it would kind of all gotta grow together with scar tissue, and then I'd have a permanent limp. So after I got home and I started going to a local doctor here at Barton Hospital, and so he made me just get up on my crutches and start walking. And when I would do that, it would hurt and it would bleed and tear it open. But he said that's the only way it's going to start growing and healing the way it needs to.
Man, that must have been a painful rehabilitation.
Yeah, it took many months. Luckily at the time I was a detective at work, so I could, after a month or so, I could go back and do some
You're actually
work.
Worried about work?
Well, yeah.
I'd be like, fuck work.
But I could go back and do a lot of, work from the desk and make phone calls and stuff and get razzed by all the guys about,
Well, I'm sure it kept the mind busy too, that, you had something to do and not have to worry about if you're going to have your leg or not. Keep your mind busy.
So how long did you have an open wound? How many months?
Oh, probably 3 or 4 months.
3 or 4 months.
Yeah, I mean, it started filling in, but it still was constantly, bleeding, and I had to, put stuff on it.
Yeah.
And then I would go out to the track on my crutches and just start walking the track, just to kind of keep my leg, going. And I'd always been real active, weightlifting and running before, and I think that helped me heal pretty quick.
Yeah.
And it was like 5 years after the accident, I ran the New York Marathon.
Wow.
And,
That's
they had told
awesome.
me that, I may never run again. And I ran the New York Marathon in like 3:44, which was a decent time. So
Yeah, we're just finishing it after being shot in the back of the leg.
yeah, so
everybody that was out there that was saying that the whiskey course was tough, me and Pete are setting it up again this year. Maybe it might be a little tougher.
yeah.
Not too much, though. Definitely some harder shots with some quartering away stuff, quartering two. Should close down that target window,
So then when after it healed, like, were you limping?
I didn't develop a limp. I still have some numbness in the back of my thigh and the back of my calf, just because when it blew through and made that big wound, it blew out a lot of the nerves. And the doctor said, some of them may grow back, but, this has been, over 30 years, I guess now, and it's still kind of numb, but I'm just used to that. I would sometimes back up against something hot or cold and not be able to feel it on my leg. So
like a wood stove or something.
Yeah,
actually,
luckily
start
nothing
smelling the
nothing
flesh.
that bad, but
Okay, now the other question is, sometimes things happen and, kind of makes you gun shy about stuff. Did you go hunting with your brother again?
Yeah, he felt really bad.
Did you make him stay in front of you?
Well, this is something I always talked about in my hunter safety class is that, it just takes one mistake and you can't call back that bullet. And, we stressed in our classes over and over that just because you put a gun on safe doesn't mean that it's always safe. I mean, you can have it on safe and you can walk through some bushes and the bushes hit the safety and knock it off safety, or the safety could be not operating properly, just like in this gun. And so you just got to, follow the cardinal rules of, never pointing that muzzle at somebody, because you never know when, something like that could happen. I mean, my brother had gone through hunter safety and he was normally very careful, but in just that one instance of as he turned, and you guys know, you're hunters, when you're turning and you're walking through rugged terrain, you're going through the bushes and you're stepping over rocks and the trail is turning, and you're constantly shifting your gun from one arm to the other, and you're always trying to make sure that the muzzle is pointed away. But, and then you could slip and the muzzle could end up, pointing towards somebody. And even if you think it's unsafe and then you fall and then the gun, the safety gets hit on a rock, anything could happen. So you just got to always kind of keep that stuff in mind. But I've hunted with guys that, are pretty careless and they go, oh, it's fine, it's unsafe. And I go, it doesn't matter, you're being an idiot and I'm not going to hunt with you if you're going to, treat a gun like that. Just because it's unsafe doesn't mean it's safe.
And it goes to the thing, the number one rule, if, the muzzle never gets pointed at something unless you plan on shooting it.
Right.
And so, but yeah, like you said, cutting through thick brush, willows, back in Ohio, sometimes, we're cutting through greenbriers and stuff like that. And, you're basically sometimes have to get down and crawl to get through these little places. So, and then going uphill the scree slopes. And, how many times have you slipped with a firearm? I've slipped many times with a firearm. And at that point, you have no control over it.
Mm-hmm.
You do your best you can.
Yeah,
but
and you're mainly thinking about, man, I don't want to bang my optics up against these rocks that I'm about to fall on. That's like
I don't know if you guys ever been chucker hunting, but chucker hunting is really rugged, nasty hunting. It's all on, loose rocks, and sometimes there's ice on the rocks. And I don't know how many times, I've stepped on these rocks and it's like a bunch of marbles or ball bearings, and
that's
my feet go flying out, my shotgun goes flying through the air and it lands in the rocks. And besides getting my shotgun beat up, it's just once that gun goes airborne, because you fall, anything could happen. And so, you just got to always kind of be aware of that.
So then after that, so I know like you sent us some pictures. We're not doing a video, but we might put some of these pictures out on the when we do some YouTube, we might put some pictures out so people can see what we're talking about. But
we'll put up a picture if you follow us on our new podcast channel on Instagram, Whiskey Chronicles Podcast. We'll be posting about this episode, and we'll include the picture that Pete gave us of the wound after.
How many weeks was that after?
That was about a week after, and when I was still back in Idaho. I was getting ready to come home, and I think I was being wheeled out in a wheelchair.
You didn't get any pictures of him? Was all with the black powder? All that
no.
that had to be gnarly. That had to be like the most gnarly picture ever.
All that unburned powder.
Well, you could see why during the Civil War, so many guys that were wounded had their legs amputated just because the infections got so bad so quickly, and that was before they had good antibiotics, because my leg got really infected too.
Well, let me ask you this: you see on TV and movies sometimes when people get shot, they actually put powder into the wound to help stop the blood flow. Is that something that you've heard of or recommend?
Yeah, I've seen that in some westerns. I'm not I'm not sure I would do that.
But from your story, it doesn't seem like the black powder helps much.
No, because if you guys have shot black powder, it's pretty nasty, dirty stuff. And when you clean your gun, I mean, it's full of sulfur and smells, and it smells up the whole house. I got a clean my guns out in the garage because it smells up the whole house. My wife has a fit when
I love that
clean
gun. Hobby's number 9 smell.
No, the black powder itself, though.
Yeah.
It's just, one of the best things to clean it with is, warm water and vinegar and stuff. And it cuts through it, but it just smells like you're in Yellowstone Park around the hot springs and stuff with all the sulfur and stuff.
Right. Yeah. But you continued on, and then you did hunt with your brother. Did you guys hunt many times after that?
Yeah, we mostly were bow hunters just because, we enjoy that. But I still shoot black powder to this day. My brother lives in Iowa, so we don't get together that much anymore. But
did you make any jokes about it?
Oh yeah, he gets a little sensitive about it.
What's some of the stuff you joke
Hopefully he's not going to listen to this thing.
We'll have to make sure we send it to him. Make sure we let Travis know to let him know that it's out there.
What kind of jokes would you crack off at him?
Oh, it wasn't so many jokes. It's just, sometimes.
Just reminding him?
Yeah, I be telling a friend about, the incident. And, if my brother was there, he'd go, God, would you quit telling people about this shit? I said, it wasn't my fault. I go, no, it wasn't your fault. I'm just telling them about getting shot and what it was like. And,
but then again, you look at that, it wasn't his fault. Definitely a malfunction. And you know what? The old muzzleloaders, they all were kind of known for, crazy stuff happening back in the day. But, it does go down to that thing, where, protect where that muzzle was being pointed. And if it's not pointed at anybody ever, then nobody ever gets shot.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Well, and I've seen a lot of accidents, being a police officer when we have range day and the guys are cleaning their guns. I'm real sensitive to accidental discharges now. And, we on my department, we carry Glocks. And Glocks are a very good gun, but in order to clean it, you have to depress the trigger to take the gun apart.
Pull the slide off.
You can pull the slide off, and you make sure there's not a round in the chamber, and then you pull the trigger. Well, invariably, someone that's not real familiar with guns will, pull the magazine out, forget that there's a round in the chamber, and pull the trigger to disassemble the gun. And luckily, those accidental discharges have been not into a person, but they've been into lockers and tables and other stuff. And the other cops aren't going to let you forget it when you pull a stupid blender like that. So you don't want to do that.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's always, gun safety. I remember when I was a kid, my dad just stressed it so much. And, if you did anything wrong, if the muzzle of the gun went anywhere near somebody, you got hit upside the head.
Yeah.
And I remember getting hit upside the head carrying a stick. He used to make me carry a stick when I was young, and he was taking my older brothers and him out hunting. Of course, it was all small game, shotgun and stuff like that, but I would carry a stick, and if my stick was pointed at somebody, I got hit upside the head. So sometimes those lessons, they're you need to learn them, and it's like you said, with being out, the trails are different, and you're going over different terrain. Things happen. And that's why you try to control everything that you control when you can control it, because there's going to be times when you can't control it.
Mm-hmm.
So then, we met Travis. Travis came out and helped. His son came out. Travis is a great guy. He's he's a fireman?
Fire captain with Sac Metro.
So he's probably dealing with a lot of homeless people down there, I imagine.
Oh, yeah. He says they go on these fires all the time that the homeless people start because they'll just burn trash to stay warm when it's cold.
Can't hardly blame them.
Yeah. But no, he's kind of had it with the whole homeless problem because of the sanitation issues, and the fire guys have to go out there and put out the homeless campfires, and then they're walking through feces and needles and all kinds of nasty stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely a big problem around here. But Travis came out with his quad and helped us, and on the day that Pete came to help, Travis wasn't there, right? Travis, he had to go.
Yeah, he had to work. I think.
He had to work, and Travis was an all-star on the quad. He got some animals up to a place that But after he went up there a couple times, he couldn't get back up it.
Yeah, I think the trail was kind of chewed up at that time.
Yeah,
so
so
we get rutted out.
Yeah, it was, and then I couldn't believe he made it up there. Pete came and looked at it, and he was like me, and I was thinking there's no way I'm riding quad up there.
I'd rather walk and carry it up there.
Which we did.
Yeah.
On our backs. But so I know that you and Travis have done a lot of trips, and I know the one that you talked to me about that really interests me because it's one that I want to do someday is that you guys went and did some caribou hunting.
Yeah, we did a drop camp in Alaska, which was a great trip.
Did you guys use a guide service, or was it all solo?
We used a service that has guides, but they also offer the drop camp. And so we went to a place called the Osprey Lodge in Alaska, and I'm not sure if they're still operating, but you fly in out of Anchorage to this place where the Mulchatna caribou herd migrates through, and they have a hunting lodge in this area. And then we had contracted for the drop camp, so they take you out to a place it's probably 4 or 5 miles away from the main camp, and they already have like a wall tent set up,
Mm-hmm.
and then they'll and they supply the food and the cooking gear, and then supposedly put you in a good area. And it was a good area. Caribou hunting's all about hitting the migration at the right time because the caribou are always migrating through. And at this point, we did pretty good. And
How many did you see at a time?
Hundreds in a day, and
From how far away?
well, like the next morning. The day you fly in, you can't hunt because there's a regulation about spotting game from the plane. And so when you're flying in, you can't hunt that day. So they took us to the camp, and then we got up the next morning, and we got up and opened up the tent flaps, and we had caribou, kind of running past the tent 50 yards away. Just the herd was just kind of migrating through this valley we were in, and they were kind of like all over the place. And
Shoot him from the tent?
Well, I told Travis, I said, they're there. Get your rifle. And he's in his underwear, and he's trying to get his rifle together and wake up. And by then they were a few hundred yards away, and he finally, tried to get a quick shot off and wasn't able to do it at that point. But we ended up getting a nice one, a couple of days later.
So I was at the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation Hunter Christmas this last December, and we were set up next to an outfitter from Alaska that does caribou hunts, and he was saying that since they're not used to seeing any humans, they don't really get too spooked. That you can get right up on them and not have to worry about spooking them too much. Is that what you saw when you were there?
Yeah, I've heard that. That didn't seem to be the case with us because at least with the big bulls, we would spot them. It's pretty open terrain with rolling hills and some little gullies and stuff. It's kind of a lot like antelope hunting. You can spot them, a mile or two away, and then you kind of see the direction they're moving, and you try to head them off. But they move really fast, even when they're walking and feeding. They've got these really big hooves that are able to kind of stay above the moss and the water and stuff that's the tundra there. And so even though they're walking, you're trying to head them off, and sometimes they'll just kind of keep moving, and you kind of never catch up to them. So it takes a while to kind of get in the right situation. But
So Travis did get a shot at him. Was he in his underwear when we took the shot?
no, we it was
From the tent? Was it from the tent?
No, it was a couple days later. We saw again every day you wake up, if you're in the right area, you get a new group of caribou migrating through. It's not like deer hunting where you kind of get everything figured out and you know where the deer are moving, and they're going to probably be moving in the same area the next day. If you miss a group of caribou, one day, and you go back the next day, that group is,
They're gone.
20 miles away, and you're just hoping for another group. And I mean, that's good and bad, because if there weren't a lot of good bulls in the one group one day, the next day a whole new group comes in, and you might have, better bulls. And so, we saw a group with some good bulls, and we were able to, work in close, and he got a nice one.
How far of a shot did you guys? How far did you get away from him to take your shot, or for him to take the shot?
I think his was about 200 yards, but we were able to lay down. They were down in a little valley, and we were up high, and so we were kind of on a hill where he could lay his his day pack down and get a steady position. I mean, it's all kind of long distance shooting, but if you do a lot of rifle shooting, we go out and we shoot, water jugs at, 300-400 yards, and it's all about having a good solid position.
Yep.
I mean, you try to do that offhand. Some guys can do it, I can't. But, and I was a sniper too, and just like with sniper work, you want a good solid position because
right.
If you're trying to shoot somebody that's got a hostage, you don't have room for error. You got to have that crosshair not moving at all.
Yeah, and then sometimes if you can't get prone or something like that to take the shot, you can always bridge your hand against a tree and kind of make a V between the tree and your arm, and put your rifle in between there. There's a lot of
and I
ways
carry
to
those
get a good
little
shot.
portable shooting sticks. I had to use those one time on another hunt, and they worked out good too.
Yeah.
But
they use those a lot in the Central Valley for pig hunting. The guides always carry those shooting sticks with them.
But practice is real important, and it builds up confidence because, guys that don't shoot a lot, they go in and they sight their rifle in, but, they don't really have a lot of confidence. But if you can hit a milk jug full of water at, 300-400 yards consistently from a good position, well, then
you're going to kill an animal.
Yeah, that as long as you don't, get all excited and, get buck fever or whatever, if you just take your time and you lay down and, it's not that hard.
No matter how many animals you take, you still get that little bit of adrenaline rush before the shot.
And that's why you do it, because you like to get that excitement feeling.
So when you were a sniper on the SWAT team, like what were the distance that you regularly practice at?
Well, we'd have to shoot twice a month for documentation, where you shoot a cold shot out of a cold barrel, because that's the most important one.
Yep.
Because sometimes the shot is going to be different when the barrel is warmed up, so you have to track your cold shots to always kind of know where they're going to be, and that's usually a 100-yard shot. Most law enforcement shootings in a sniper situation are like 80 yards to 100 yards, and a 100-yard shot from a and a sniper rifle for law enforcement, we have the bipod on the front, and if you're on a bipod in a solid position, a 100-yard shot, it's like, what part of the pupil do you want me to take out of his eye? I mean, we're shooting these, custom-made tactical rifles that
what
shoot
caliber?
308.
308.
Yeah, and we're shooting federal match ammo, and if you know what you're doing and you've got good trigger control in a solid position, I mean, that's what you need to do, because if the guy's got a hostage, you got to be able to, take out the medulla oblongata, which is the brainstem, because if you take that out, he can't pull the trigger on a gun. It just drops him immediately. And so you need to have that precision. They call it a surgical shot.
Aim for the medulla, everybody.
That's right.
I'm always been a big proponent of headshots hunting. If you're close enough and you can take the headshot.
Yeah, it's the brainstem. If you take out the brainstem, they can't react because it's gone, and they can't do anything.
Well, and then hunting, it also saves meat.
Mm-hmm.
You shoot in the boiler room, you're probably going to get a shoulder. There's usually, a little quartering, something. You're going to probably damage a shoulder, which is waste of meat, which, we always like to maximize our meat intake when we're out hunting, for sure.
So what kind of rifle did you guys use during that time in SWAT? What model? Was it a Remington 700? What was it?
Well, they were custom made by different gunsmiths. Most of them were based on a Remington 700 Action.
Right.
I mean, that's what they used in Vietnam, and it's a really solid action. But then they would have, like a custom barrel made by Macmillan or, some other, person in a custom synthetic stock.
Now, did they have the 5R rifling back then? I don't think that was invented yet. You're familiar with that? Because you know how most of the rifling is 6 rifles or 6 grooves to get the bullet spinning.
Uh-huh.
There's this new 5R technology that's supposed to make it more accurate, but I don't believe that was around.
Yeah, we didn't have that. But, they came guaranteed to shoot, basically a half inch at 100 yards, and they would do that, if you did your part. And basically, 3 shots at 100 yards would just be either one hole, or they would clover leaf together where it was, one ragged hole, and that's what you want.
Yeah.
So,
Justin likes to go through the same hole with his 300 Win Mag. What was it? What was that rifle you got?
It's a Remington 700 with a heavy barrel.
Yeah.
So it's really heavy, and it's got a custom stock on it, so that adds some weight to it. But it's probably the most accurate.
He likes to
I've
go
ever
through
shot.
the same hole at 300 yards.
If you can do that, that's good.
And he can.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Not every time.
Not every time. But close. I mean, he's like this, a grouping of about 1.5 inches, 2 inches, and he's upset about it. And I'm lucky to hit a pie plate at like 100 yards. I'm thinking I can kill.
Well, a lot of it's in the rifle, a lot of it's in the ammo too. I mean, the match ammo that we shot, there's a big difference between like hunting ammo and then match ammo. And,
Yeah, definitely.
and that's why I like reloading, is because sometimes, like, I've got a couple old Savage 99s and 250 Savage. It's kind of a neat old caliber that came out in 1899, and the factory ammo for it is horrendous. The accuracy is horrible. I'd get like 2 or 3 inch groups, and I would just think these rifles were just horrible. The rifling must be screwed up or whatever. But I started reloading for them and putting
some good match ammo in through
well,
it.
I just tried lots of different powders and different loads and stuff and experimented, and finally I got to where one of the rifles shoots 1/2 inch groups, where before it was shooting like 2 and 3 inch groups. And that's all just because I like to just spend the time trying different loads and seeing what works and what doesn't. But at least in that case, a factory Remington load was horrible.
Right.
And part of it's the twist of the rifle, because when those were first made, I think the rifling twist was like 1 in 14, because they were developed for like an 87 grain bullet instead of a 100 grain bullet. And 100 grain bullet's better for hunting. 87 is more for varmints, but they do make a good 87 grain bullet for hunting that's put together right. It'll hold together. So you just have to kind of experiment with the different bullet weights and the different powders, and you can tailor it to your own needs.
That's awesome.
Well, I want to go back to, because Pete's told me this story at the gym a few times about when you guys did get to Caribou and what it was like hiking that heavy weight in the tundra, so people kind of get a feel for that.
Yeah, it's totally different than hiking on solid ground.
And for tundra, for the people back home that haven't been able to experience it, what does that consist of? Is it just pretty much frozen moss and rock poking through, frozen ice?
It's kind of like most of it's real marshy, and they have these big clumps of grass and moss that are about the size of a basketball, and it's just kind of constant in the tundra. And so when you step on them, they're kind of squishy and wet, and they kind of roll. And so you never really get any solid footing, and you're carrying, a heavy pack with, some caribou quarters.
How much does a caribou weigh?
They're not like an elk. They're kind of in between a deer and an elk. They're probably, a good bull's probably 400 or 500 pounds.
Dressed or undressed?
Undressed. But then you're carrying, like the head with the antlers, or a couple of quarter. I mean, the pack's pretty heavy.
Are they in velvet? Were they in velvet?
Well, different times. I mean, I've hunted them in both. In velvet, they look nice, but then when you get them back to camp, a lot of times the velvet is at the point where it's starting to peel off and it's kind of bloody, and to try to preserve it and get it back to where the taxidermist can keep that on is sometimes tough, because you may be there for a few days before you get picked up by the bush plane, and then you take it into town to get it to the taxidermist. And depending on how far the caribou was trying to rub the velvet off at that point, sometimes if it's early when the velvet is still solid, I think they inject it with formaldehyde or something to kind of preserve it. But other times I've seen them where the velvet is just kind of hanging off in strands, and what they end up doing is just kind of pulling the velvet off, and then the antlers are kind of bloody at that point, and then they stain them later with kind of a wood stain, just to kind of get the
better look for the wall.
The better look. So I've done them both. I like hunting kind of later in the season, because with caribou, the big bulls later in the season, when it's late fall and it's starting to get real cold, they get a real kind of white mane on them, and they look really cool, and they make a really nice mount. You
do a shoulder mount usually.
Yeah, they're gorgeous animals, and when you get that, and that makes it easy when you're hunting. When you see a bunch of caribou and some are cows and small bulls, and then you see a couple that have these big white manes from a distance, you go, oh, it's got to be a nice bull, and you put the spotting scope on, and usually he's got nice horns, and it's hard to judge caribou too because they all have pretty big horns, and if
the females have antlers as well, correct?
Right. But if you've been hunting deer all your life, and then you see caribou that have horns everywhere, you don't want to shoot the first one. And there's a way to use their body size with the horns and the shape and curl of the antlers to judge one that's kind of trophy size. Because if you take the first one you see that you think is good, and then you've already filled your tag, and then 2 or 3 days later you're seeing these ones that are twice that size with huge racks, you don't want to get into that.
Yeah, you start to feel a little bit.
So how is the caribou meat?
It was good. Yeah.
Is it like elk? Is it like deer? Is it like in between? Like the size you say is in between?
Yeah, I'd say it's kind of like probably like elk. We would take it into a place in Anchorage called Alaska Sausage, and they do.
Just the name of that place.
Sounds like a good place to stop.
Sounds like a good place to stay.
And they do a lot of the processing, and then there's a place called Indian Valley Meats, and they're south of
both
Anchorage.
Really good names.
Yeah. and they they can make it into jerky, they can make it into steaks, they can make it into sausage. We usually get a different variety.
So the
pack.
hindquarters is pretty much the same, like a deer, like an elk. You get the football roast. You get you get the like.
But this gets expensive too. Flying it all out and getting it all processed. So a lot of times, if you're on a guided hunt up there in Alaska or a drop camp, all the outfitters have connections with a lot of the Native American villages where they like the meat donated, and so a lot of times they'll ask you if you want to take some of the real nice cuts, and then if you're willing to give some of the meat to the different villages up there because they kind of depend on it.
That's the same kind of deal when you go do a hunting over in Africa too.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, since you can't bring the meat back, you donate it to a tribe there, and
and they really need it, and it gets pretty pricey to fly all the meat back. So and then if you're getting the head done too, that's. I don't know what it is these days.
It's not for a poor man.
No, it's I'm sure it's over $1,000 now. I think.
Oh yeah, easy.
That's why we process everything ourselves.
Well, I've tried some taxidermy by myself.
We don't do the taxidermy.
It's hard to do a good one.
Yeah. I have a friend of mine back in Ohio. He did those mounts up there.
Yeah, those are good.
Yeah, and then that one was a guy here, Justin. Of course, Justin's the lucky guy that gets the. First year he applies for a Thule elk tag.
Oh, wow.
He draws it. And then he just got a new job, and he's like, well, Dad, I got to go down and I got to shoot a bull on Saturday because I got to work on Monday. And I'm like, well, first he wasn't going to go. And I'm like, no, you have to go. And he's like, well, I have to shoot a bull on Saturday, and then I have to be back to work, start my new job on Monday. And I'm like, well, sometimes it doesn't work that way, but let's go down. And, of course, the way he is, it always works out that way. So it worked out that way for him. But so he's got the hardest elk of all the elk Grand Slam. So you got the Roosevelt, the Rocky Mountain, and the Thule, and the other guys that were there. They only gave out 3 tags for the archery and tag that year. That was 2017.
Yep.
And they'd been waiting 12 and 15 years to get that tag.
That's
now
hard.
California raised. Did you see they raised the preference points to 17?
No. Well,
So that means when I get a chance to shoot a bighorn sheep, we'll need somebody to wheel me out there.
Yeah, 90 years old if you make it that long.
So before we wrap it up, I want to just kind of get your input for people that are wanting to reload and start reloading at home. What are your basic necessities that you need to pick up to be able to start and get into it? Just to get by, on a budget if somebody's wanting to start doing it themselves.
Just get a good reloading book, either by Spear or Nosler or Hornaday. I think there's a lot of stuff on YouTube now too but you just got to take it slow. I mean, it's pretty safe if you know what you're doing. The biggest, problem you can get into is when you're measuring powder and stuff. You don't want distractions, and you don't want to be trying to measure powder for loads and then trying to talk to buddies and doing stuff.
Watch TV,
doing the same, because you got to pay attention to detail on what you're doing. And so you just got to take it slow. The best way is to have someone that is a reloader show you kind of what to do. I mean, you can learn on your own. That's what I did. And the most expensive part of a reloaded ammunition is the case. And if you reload right, you can use the cases over and over,
right.
10, 20, 30 times sometimes with different loads if they're not loaded too hot. And so you just shoot a lot more.
But what equipment do they need just to get the basics? Because I know you need the press, right? And you need what else?
Yeah, you need the press. You need, obviously the powder and the primers, which is getting harder and harder to get, and the bullets. You need a powder scale. Most of them now are, electronic, digital powder scales. And a good reloading book gives you, the starting places to start. And, if you increase the powder, you just do it very, very gradually and try one or two loads and make sure there's indications if it's too hot. And so you don't want to just try a real hot load first. You want to just try a kind of a below standard or average load first to see.
And work your way up.
Because every gun has different chamber dimensions, and, what works in one gun may not work in another one. So you just want to take it slow and easy and see what works for your gun, and then, just always save your brass. And I like it just because you can custom make your ammo, and so like I said, I can make more accurate ammo on some of my guns than I can with the factory stuff.
So we can do our next podcast, YouTube video, once you get moved into your new place.
Yeah.
And from what I'm understanding at your new place, maybe we can load them and then go shoot them.
Yeah.
That helps out a lot, because then you get to test your load right away.
Pete is moving out of Tahoe to get closer to his grandkids, but it's funny when I was talking to him about his place, he was telling me about how it's on a hill and he has a good line of sight for anybody coming up the driveway.
So that's a good warning. Don't go snooping around Pete's new place,
or probably any SWAT sniper.
Well, hey guys, thanks for tuning in. You've been listening to the Whiskey Chronicles podcast. You'll be able to find it on all platforms except Apple, iPod, podcast, just because we need to get in with the system for a few episodes before they start releasing them. But find us on iHeartRadio, Spotify, YouTube.
And just one more thing, Pete, from your experience, what in one sentence, what can you sum up to help everybody out so that doesn't happen to them?
Getting shot through the leg by your brother.
just always be aware of that muzzle is. You never point that muzzle, at anything you don't intend to shoot. Even if you just treat every gun like it's loaded. If the gun is unloaded, you just tell yourself it's loaded, and you just never point it at anybody.
And if the person has the gun that you're next to, you kind of want to always just be aware of where they're pointing the gun to, so that you can jump out of the way just in case they're an idiot.
Yeah.
Or also too, help them out and instruct them and let them know. And then if you're out there hunting with somebody and somebody gives you hey, watch your muzzle, get your ego out of the way, because your ego could wind up, hurting somebody. And so, hey, this is a great podcast. So I think everybody should learn something from this, that, the first day of a hunting trip that you planned out for months and months and months, and then it comes, shit can happen, and
unexpectedly.
So, always be safe.
Sounds good, guys. We'll see you on the next one. Remember, your first shot's always the most important. Except for when it's through your calf or through your thigh.
Well, it's a hamstring. But you'll see the picture on YouTube.
Thank you.
Yeah, all right.